sound, it's recording, we've got light, we've got sound, we've got gin, ready to go. Oh, that better? Can I hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Sin and Tonic. Today's story is that of June and Jennifer Gibbons, aka the Silent Twins. This one was an emotional roller coaster for me, I'm not gonna lie. So let's go. Sin and Tonic! I have something new today. It is gin, but it's a gin liqueur. Elderflower and gin liqueur from M&S. Shut up. And it's got, I don't know if you can see, little gold flecks. Can you see? Who do I think I am? Hey? Lolly. You can come with me on my emotional roller coaster. Okay, what a treat for you all. Let's go. June and Jennifer Gibbons were born to Aubrey and Gloria Gibbons. And Aubrey and Gloria came over from Barbados. How exotic does that sound? Lovely. I've never been, I don't know much about it actually, but it sounds just, yeah, lush. I'm going to Google it. Damn it. It's beautiful. Well, the pictures that I found were beautiful. Aubrey was in the Royal Air Force, so he travelled around a lot for work. They felt incredibly blessed. Excuse me, gin will help. God, that is so nice. Unbelievable. It like touches a certain little spot in my brain. Just one. Where was I? Aubrey and Gloria felt incredibly blessed to have their twins. They had 2 children already. What is? It's just asking for gin. That's what it is. I digress. They had 2 children, then they had the twins, and then later on they had another daughter called Rosie. 5 kiddos. It's quite a lot, isn't it? Jennifer and June and Jennifer, they were identical twins. I do find twins intriguing, especially you know, like when they say they have connections and they can feel like if the other one's in pain, sometimes like certain twins, they can, not all twins, but I think it is a thing, isn't it? It's a phenomena where like one twin can like break their leg and the other twin's like, like if they're not together and they don't know, they're just like, oh my God, pain in my leg. Like that is weird, isn't it? Oh, I've just had so many thoughts, just like an epiphany then. Oh my gosh. You know, like consciousness, like do twins, this is just pure, like just thinking, it just popped in my head, but like do twins, like to a certain degree, share like a consciousness a little bit? Yeah. I mean, right, buckle up because this does get spooky. Spooky. It spooked me right out. Not gonna lie. Jennifer and June, they had a very, very strong bond, and they definitely were a set of twins that had this sort of a really strong connection, shall we say. When they were young and they were learning to speak and talk, they both shared the same speech impediment. Now that's one of many, many odd things in this case, because that is bizarre, isn't it? Although they are identical twins, and if there was some issue, I don't know, but they shared a speech impediment. As they grew, it became apparent that like they just could really only understand each other. Other people struggled to understand them, even their own parents and their siblings. Just it was so hard to understand them. Like no one really did. They only understood each other. June would say that they just got so frustrated, so fed up with repeating themselves over and over and over again. People would be like, what are you saying? What are you saying? And well, you can imagine that gets annoying. So in the end, they just stopped bothering. They were like, oh, this is annoying. And probably a bit embarrassing as well. Like it must be really frustrating to not be understood. Their mum Gloria would say that she found them shy. The shyness came from not being able to communicate, and the minute they weren't heard the first time or understood the first time, they would just shrink back into their shells, she said. So it made them withdraw, basically. So their speech impediment really had quite a big impact. Interestingly, June would say that not speaking just became a habit. It would turn out in the end just this incredibly ingrained habit that they could not break. And so it was thought that the twins came up with their own language that only the two of them could understand and speak. FYI, my kids at one point made their own language, but they both didn't understand each other, so it didn't work. They both made up their own language, but neither could understand the other. That was an interesting day. Lots of frustration. So these poor babies, young children, cannot speak properly with a very severe speech impediment, and they can't communicate. And I did look into it and I did research it, and it just feels like it was just nothing happened about that. That was just the way they were. It got so much worse because when they were 11, they moved, again, due to the RAF, and they moved to Wales, and slightly sweaty upper lip, Soph. Slightly, not as bad as last week. When they were at school, now this is where it gets spook the fucky, okay? Because, yeah, if you want to check out some footage, have a check on YouTube. There's a cool documentary you can watch, heartbreaking though. But they were odd. It's like scary. It's like, what the hell? They wouldn't talk. No talking, right? So first of all, that's odd, isn't it? They were just very sort of like, well, amazing posture. I really should take a leaf out of their book in that sense. Really very like upright, almost like robotic. They would walk in sync, one behind each other sometimes. That's freaky, isn't it? What the hell? Imagine that. I mean, as a child, I can imagine being frightened of that situation. Two identical twins walking down the corridor, one behind the other, bolt upright, no expression, doing like that, looking on. And if they passed if anyone passing them, they would just stop dead together, at the same time, and just stare at that person walking past. Can you freaking imagine that? Okay, so that is freaky deaky, isn't it? Right? That's scary. Sorry, but that is scary. Don't speak. No emotion. Do everything in time with each other. Eat in time with each other. What? Like weird, very odd behaviour. Now, as a young child, right, in that situation with two kids like that, I can understand you being a bit freaked out and a bit scared and like, even, yeah, okay, as an adult, as a teacher, as a helper, a little bit like, okie dokes. Again, no one reaches out here to help or support or think there's something not right here. Just very like they just did not know what to do with it. Also, Jennifer and June were the only black students, and they also suffered a lot of bullying for the way they were, because it was scary and spooky and odd. I'm not excusing it, but they did suffer bullying for that. And also racism, just masses of racism, because they were the only black students. And not only the only black students, but also incredibly odd behaviour as well. So it just made this like melting pot of like, just, yeah, they were bullied. So much so that they were allowed to leave school like 5 minutes before everybody else so that they could avoid the bullying. I mean, thank you for doing that, teachers and stuff, because that's probably about the only freaking thing that they did for these kids. But yeah, a guy came into the school to do bombs. What are they called? You know, your BCG, your jabs. I can't remember how old you are with that. I feel like you're 13 or 14, perhaps 15. I must have been younger than, maybe 11. Anyway, I need to find out. When do you have your BCG? Well, that seems bizarre, Interesting. They must have been around 13 or 14 and they were having their TB jab. He said because they were different, he tried to communicate and chat with them and talk to them. And he said that he noticed well, they just ignored him. They were completely cut off, and it was just very odd behaviour. And I believe, I may be incorrect, so do correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that this guy, this practitioner, was the man that highlighted the need for them to go and see like a psychologist, because their behaviour was extremely bizarre. And he was like, that's not right. So well done that man. Well done that man, because he was the first person that actually tried to reach out to get some help and support for these girls. At this point, they're 13 and 14. They haven't spoken to anybody in that time. Just a little note, it's so easy to just be well judgmental of people. And I must admit, if I hadn't watched that documentary and it had their parents in it, I think I would have really judged really harshly the fact that nothing was done for them. I mean, until like 13, 14 years old, it was just like, oh, like they were just left to it. And that seems really cruel and unfair. And then you watch this documentary and their parents just seem, it makes you realise that people, they can only do their best with what they have. And yeah, like that's one of the things that's so heartbreaking, is that they just seemed genuinely lost, unsupported, and did not know what to do, like whatsoever. And then when you look at what happened when they went to school, and all of those adults were just like, don't know, like, so yeah, I think they were massively let down. But it's not just like black and white, is it? Because you think, well, what the hell were their parents doing? But it's just like, when you see the anguish and the pain and the struggle and the like just lost sheep, like not knowing what to do. And if you're a parent, like that does happen, doesn't it? Sometimes you just have no clue. And it was very much like that with this family. And that's just sad. That is just sad. So although I will go through this story and I massively feel like they were hugely let down in so many areas, it's like, okay, they were really let down. It's just like one of those things where just no one knew what the hell to do. And that makes it really frustrating and tragic. The twins were then sent to like a psychologist. That psychologist then diagnosed them with selective mutism. They could speak, but they chose not to. The girls were then sent to a specialist school. And it's beautiful to see what the right people and the right support can do for somebody, because the girls seem to do incredibly well. And it was discovered, get this, that their language, their secret language that they'd made up, was not another language whatsoever. It was English, but it was just really quick, spoken very, very quickly. How mad is that, eh? They were also tested very heavily at the school, this specialist school. They were tested heavily because they really wanted to understand them. They wanted to know about them, and like, you know, it's extreme, isn't it? The girls, they don't talk, but they do talk to each other very, very quickly in English. They completely shut themselves away and withdrew from everyone around them. They would eat in unison, walk in unison. Just fascinating and freaky. You would think that because of this extreme bond, doing everything together, that the girls were close, happy in their unity or whatever. No, they were not. And this is what makes it even more tragic. The girls were in fact incredibly trapped within this relationship that they had. It was like they were one of the same, but two separate people. But yeah, it was, I can't even describe it, but it's so scary, in fact. Like what, and it wasn't wanted. This was what's even more frightening. It wasn't wanted. It's almost like, you know, conjoined twins. Like you're stuck together, like there's nothing you can do about it. And in fact, like it's taking you apart might kill you. Very, very similar situation here, guys. So they weren't physically attached, but it's like they were. It's like they were. It's just so bizarre. So they hated it. They grew in their teenage years to absolutely despise the fact that they were twins. They so desperately wanted to be separate people. And they also couldn't live without each other. So although they had this desperate need to be apart, whenever they were parted, it did not go well. No. I made some notes, so I'm going to just have a look at them here because they wrote lots and lots of stuff in their diaries. The twins were avid writers. They loved it. They loved writing, and they both had journals, diaries that they would keep. They wrote in their diaries that they couldn't help the behaviour that they had. They couldn't stop doing it. They didn't want to walk together, eat at the same time. They didn't want to not talk to people. They didn't want to be this way, but they just couldn't help it. Bizarre. And they wanted to be separate, but they just couldn't. And they would write in their diaries that this was the way it had to be. Did I say had? Had to be. They would write also in their diaries that if one of them didn't exist, then the other one would be free. They would be free to eat, to walk, and to talk to other people. One of them wrote in their diary, "We act stupid when we're together." So they were incredibly aware of this very odd behaviour, and they didn't like it. This is where it gets spicy. A little bit of insight into what's going on in the mind. They decided to trial a separation between the pair, and they decided to let the twins choose who would stay, who would go. Ooh-wee. And yeah, this was the first time ever that the twins showed emotion, and it was extraordinary. They would scream at each other, big screaming abdabs. They would have fights, just proper go for it, really argue, and the staff had never seen them show any emotion. I mean, I'm not joking. They are, in the footage that you see, little robots. They don't speak to anyone, everything's in unison. It's freaking scary. This I thought was so interesting though. In one of their rows, or a few of their rows, Jennifer would scream at June, "You are Jennifer. You are Jennifer." In some of their journals later, Jennifer had written some batshit crazy stuff. Like, she had written that June couldn't possibly be her real twin because her real twin would look exactly the same. Her real twin would basically, June wasn't stepping up to the mark. Jennifer wanted an exact replica. She wanted her again in June. And I think she found it incredibly difficult that June was her own person. And yeah, it just seemed like Jennifer seemed to have much more of like a psychological issue with the twin thing. She wanted like an absolute clone of herself that would do what she wanted, sound like she wanted, look exactly the same. They were identical twins, so I don't know what she's going on about there. But yeah, it was bizarre. She wanted June to be her. Chills. She just couldn't stand that June would be different to her in any way. Maybe that's where her hatred of June came from, and maybe June's hatred of Jennifer was the trapping nature of that. Just how trapping that is. They were then separated, and it was decided that June would be the one to leave because they did believe that June had more reserve. She was stronger. June seems incredibly trapped. It feels so oppressive, the whole situation. It feels just awful. The fact that she describes it so often as a habit is like, yeah, she just went along with this, and eventually she just couldn't get out. She couldn't break out. I am putting words in their mouth here, but it's almost like she had a very oppressive twin, and she was constantly keeping June down. You're me. You're me. Like, that's weird, isn't it? It felt like that. That's just my opinion, but it feels like that. Oh, freaking. Anyhow, June was removed, and there's footage, and it is so sad because once June was removed, both of the twins, they could not cope. They couldn't live without each other, despite the hatred of one another. And there was strong hate, strong. They tried to kill each other numerous times. They tried to drown each other in a river, like properly, like drown, like, you know, to the death. Drowned the other twin. One of them tried to strangle the other one with the wire of their radio. Anger, hatred, desperation, gin. If they weren't at school, they spent their entire life. This whole story is just so trapping. They spent their entire life in their bedroom. They shared a bedroom with their younger sister Rosie until Rosie was 11. And they would spend their life there. They would eat their meals there because they couldn't bear for anybody else, even their family members, to watch them eat or speak. And when they were in their room, they would use their dolls, they had lots of dolls, to enact life, like normal life that they knew was outside of their bedroom, outside of their school, life that they just wanted so desperately to live, desperately, and they couldn't do it. So they would use these dolls to like act out scenarios and just mundane things sometimes, just life, just living. And they would record like little plays on their tape recorder, and they would dress up and they would play with their dolls, and they would talk to Rosie until Rosie moved out of their bedroom when she was 11, and then they cut her off too. Completely cut everyone out. They cut everyone off. They cut their parents off, siblings. It was just them. And again, their parents just did not know what to do. They allowed them to eat in their bedroom because otherwise they wouldn't eat. They allowed them to sit in their bedroom and watch TV, like out of the door. You know, it's just, bizarre. When they stopped talking to Rosie, that made her sad, and that is heartbreaking, isn't it? 11 years old, and your sisters are just cut you off. I've skipped ahead of myself a little, or back and forwards, but they were separated, like I was saying, and it didn't go well. So what happened actually, in fact, was that they were catatonic. Now that is like extreme. So basically, you know, like how withdrawn they are from the world anyway, they then, like when they were separated, it just got a hell of a lot worse. Crazy. They were like zombies. They stopped eating. They did nothing. Like they didn't even sleep. Like June would just sit on her bed, fully dressed. She wouldn't go to bed. Just sit there. They'd sometimes find her in the morning just laying on the bed. You're joking? Could not do a job like that. Oh my God. Can you imagine at night? At night, like having to deal with people with extreme mental health. I would shit my pants. Thank God for people that do that job, is all I can say. Because, I'd just be terrified. And really, they are just people with severe problems, and it's just awfully sad, and normally have had a really tragic and awful life, but it is frightening, isn't it? It's just laying in bed like that, fully clothed. No, can't. June was very upset that she'd been the one chosen to be separated and to leave. She made a comment which made me just feel so much for her, because she said, "Why me?" And then she said, "My whole life was why me." And that again rolls into my little speculations that she was sort of the undertrodden, is that even a word, Sophie? The suppressed twin. So separation did not go well. Both of them just could not function. Just nope. Could not do it alone. And then this is where I'm just like, are you freaking joking? 16 years old, end of school. Bye. Bye. See ya. No support. No thought that these children that have just been in specialist school with parents that clearly were lost and didn't know what to do, and what's going on? What's going to happen next with these girls? What are we going to do? Nothing. Literally, they then spent their life in their bedroom. The only bloody people that took any what's the word, like, responsibility for bettering the situation was the girls. They ordered a course. You know, you can order a course and get it delivered to your home and stuff, and it, like, about how to communicate. They ordered that themselves, got it delivered, and they did it in their bedroom. And they tried really hard. They tried with their family, their own family, to talk, to communicate, to be polite, and they just could not do it. Is that not just screaming out, like, please help us? Please help us, we would like to be better. We would like to be part of society and communicate. Piss me off. They'd watch the world out of their window with binoculars and they became depressed, as you would. This is when they decided to channel their energy, and again, like, there's so much life and spark about them, like, you know, come on, they want to be better, they want to do something, they want to be out in the world, they want to communicate, and they're finding it too hard. But they both were really avid writers. They loved their diary entries and stuff, and they decided, and I could cry, that they so desperately wanted to be a part of the world, to bring something to the table, to communicate, to get them out there in the big wide world, right? So much so that they decided that they were going to write. They were going to write books, and they were going to be bestsellers, and they were going to make their family proud. June would say, like, we couldn't talk to our family. We couldn't participate in family life or any sort of life. And we wanted to make them proud. We wanted them to be proud of us. And this was the only way that we could think how. Breaks my freaking heart. In 1981, they tried to get their novels and things published, and the first books they did not go well, and this made them even more depressed, as you can imagine. They so desperately wanted to express themselves. When they were 18, there was this big sort of pivotal moment where they were like, we need to get out in the frickin' world, man. And again, with a lack of support and guidance, they just fell flat. They fell into incredibly bad company. They had been at school with two twins, oddly, from the States, from the USA, and these twins, oh my God, the itchiest belly known to man. Oh my God, what the hell's that? These twins were trouble. They were naughty boys. They had been in trouble for arson and theft and things like that, and they were troubled souls. The girls found them and they started to hang out with them. They were 18 now, and they wanted to go out and be a part of the world together. And also these boys, basically they had lots of sex, lots of drugs, lots of alcohol, and lots of naughty behaviour. They started taking things, stealing, and this escalated quickly until eventually the boys had to go back to the States, and they just found a note, I think, somewhere just saying like, oh, I'm sorry, we've got to go back to the States next week. And this broke the girls' heart. They were in love with these boys. They'd spent a whole summer of, well, having a jolly good time, what it sounds of it, but in all the wrong ways, like not wholesome fun. And yeah, but they felt alive. And June would say that summer was the best summer of their lives because they were free. They were talking. They were normal, although they weren't, because they were being very, very naughty. But to them, they were out living. They fought over the boys. They fought massively, and that was when one of them tried to strangle the other one with the cord of a radio. Don't be fighting over boys, girls. No. Don't be fighting over boys. When the boys had to go back to the USA, the twins wanted to watch the world burn, freaking literally. And they set fire to a tractor shop. They burnt that to the ground. Big, big fire. Big, big trouble. And then, silly cows, wrote about it in their diaries. Ring. And of course, when like suspicion was then thrown on them, like, oh, you know, they probably weren't all that savvy about it, they took their blimmin' journals, diaries, to the police station. And in those diaries, it says that they had done it. Not only had they done it, but worryingly really enjoyed it as well. June had written in her diary that it was the best day of her life and that she wanted to do it again. Well, she also wrote in that diary that she thought it might be the first Christmas that she'd spend in prison. Flippin' hell. She would describe setting that fire as an expression. She was expressing herself. And this whole idea of expression, getting writing and doing it, it's all about expressing herself. It just feels like she was just so suppressed. That word I have used so much, but that's the right word. She wanted to, look at how angry I am, world. Look. Burn it to the ground. And then she made the most interesting comment ever in this documentary that, because they used to steal things as well. They had a bit of a, sheet. What do you call that? Like a rap sheet of all this bad stuff that they'd done. You did this, you did that, stealing, blah, blah, blah. And then they described her as a thief. And she was like, yeah, okay, I am a thief, but haven't I always been? My brain was like, ba-bum. It felt like she was stealing Jennifer's personality. Just so loaded it was. So loaded, that comment. Just feels like, what you've always been a thief. Like, thief of what? And then it was like, she's just always taken on Jennifer. And Jennifer saying to her, you are Jennifer. Isn't it just mad? They were sent to prison for their crimes, and very quickly it was apparent that they couldn't be together, but they couldn't be apart, because if they were apart, they'd go catatonic and all zombie-like and drooling, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, like that in bed. But if they were together, they freaking hated each other and they wanted to kill each other and they would fight. So what a situation. It was clear to the prison staff and other professionals that they brought in that they needed treatment and not prison. It was decided that they would be sent to Broadmoor Psychiatric Hospital indefinitely. I do understand to a point you can't put a time frame on how long it will take somebody to get better, but these girls, no one really knew what was wrong with them, or was there a diagnosis? No one really knew what to do with them. And so at 19 years old, the youngest admissions into Broadmoor Psychiatric Hospital, and that's where they went. These were just incredibly vulnerable children that had been let down and had no real support for much of their life. They hated Broadmoor. When they got there, the wards were incredibly busy. Can you imagine going there and the people that are there? Like I said, I know they're troubled and they're poorly, but it's scary. It is scary. They were put on separate wards. They were diagnosed with schizophrenia, although they didn't have that. Great. Had to put some sort of label on it so they could drug them up. The minute they were diagnosed with that, they started shoving tranquilizers in their face so that they were pliable and chill and not catatonic. And the tranquilizers, they relaxed them so much that they actually started to talk. So silver lining, I don't know, just feels like not the right thing to do, but okay. They could write to their parents and their family, they could write to each other, and they did sometimes visit each other on each other's wards in the evening time. June would describe being on the medication as just making her numb. Every couple of years, they would have like a court hearing, how are they doing? Are they getting better? Oh, maybe they could just do with a couple more years. Couple more years. The girls went to Broadmoor believing that they would be there for about 3 years. And 12 years later, this got me. One of them would write in their diary, "We are forgotten." And you can't argue with that. In the March of 1993, they were being moved to a more minimum security facility. So, not as intense as Broadmoor. And around this time, they started to discuss which one would sacrifice themselves. They strongly believed that they could not live happily as a pair. And I think the thought of their process of being released out of hospital triggered them to be like, oh my God, when we go out into the real wide world, there can only be one, because we are not good together. And they both really believed that. They believed that one of them had to die, one of them had to go. And so, again, they would then argue about this. It should be you. It should be, of course, it should be the other one. But yeah, so they'd have this argument about who should stay and who would sacrifice themselves for the other. They were nearly 30 years old. Okay, 30 years old, nearly 30 years old, and they'd lived all of their young adult life in a psychiatric hospital, diagnosed with schizophrenia that they didn't fricking have, because no one knew ever what the frick to do with them. It pisses me off. Talk about tragedy. Anyway, when they were moving to their new hospital, they got into the car and Jennifer lay her head on June, and she said that she didn't feel very well. In letters to each other previous to this spooked me right out. Jennifer would write to June to say that she knew she would die young and way before her twin. What? Weird, isn't it? Anyway, they're in the taxi. They're going to a new hospital. She doesn't feel very well. When they got to the new hospital, she was taken straight to the medical room or medical part of the hospital, and she died. Jennifer died. Jennifer died of something that is rarely ever fatal. She was young and she was fit and healthy, and in the medical examiner's finding that there's lots of reasons why this condition could happen: drugs, an exertion, like having just suddenly exercising, things like that, and all of those were discounted. So that nothing could explain what had happened. Her heart had inflamed. It was a sudden inflammation of her heart. And all of the things that could explain why that would happen to her just hadn't happened to her. So what the hell? And even when that does happen, again, like I said, it's rarely fatal. It was like Jennifer had decided that she was going to die. It's spooky. June was devastated by the death of her sister. I mean, this is the ultimate separation from this pairing that's just been trapping. They both knew that one or the other's death was the only way to be free. They both knew that. They both said that. It was the only way that the other twin could live a happy life. Doesn't it feel like a curse? It feels like they've been put under a curse. Oh, I freaked myself out. But that's what it feels like some curse on them. Just, On the 18th of March in 1994, June was released from hospital. She says that she lives her life for her sister. She feels she owes it to her to live a full and happy life, which is nice. For a long time, she had survivor syndrome and she couldn't understand that she was left behind. She was the one that was living, and she found that incredibly difficult to deal with. She describes the whole thing up until that point as one big mess, and she is not freaking wrong. She currently lives near her parents and her sister in Wales and lives just a normal life, and she does stay out of the spotlight. She did some interviews and stuff earlier, years ago, but now, no. And I don't blame her. It's like, what a life to live before you live your life. Just bonkers and horrible. This story started out when I started researching it as a spooky as hell. story. Like originally I was going to cover it at Halloween because I was like, oh my gosh, these girls, like that is scary, you know, like the way that they were. And as I just looked into it, I was like, that's not scary, that's sad, that's tragic, one big mess. Thank you so much for joining me today for another episode of Sin and Tonic. I do hope you... Whoa, the feck! Water ran down my wrist and I swear for some reason it felt like I'd peed myself. Put my hands up here and... What? Gin will help. That's so good. Even if it did make me all wet. What was I saying? I hope you can join me next week for another true crime story and a glass, jug, vase, bucket, maybe even with a little bit of gold in it if you're lucky, of gin. Thank you, my loves. Have a wonderful weekend and I shall see you next week. Bye!